And we're back. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Golf Intervention Podcast. It's good to be a little late on the East Coast here on a Monday night. Rob Fales and I, we got big plans for the Golf Intervention we've been discussing. And on tonight's episode, we're going to take on a couple of listener questions. We sort of wanted to have a little bridge, a little time out of the mental game series that we're going to wrap up next week. We did not want to take this week off. And we didn't want to do an episode that was too much overlapping with Dr. Pryor's information. Remember, Raymond Pryor on next week, Golf Beneath the Surface. If you haven't read the book, like we said last time, pick it up and read it. I'm reading it right now. I'm finishing it up. Unbelievable content and information. We are really thrilled to have him coming on the show. So tonight, we're just going to do a couple listener questions. We have done this a few times. I really enjoy it. Rob, do you like the listener question episodes? Is it fun?
Love listener question episodes.
What's fun for us about it is we basically don't outline it, right? We have a question, and Robbie and I talk about it like we've been doing for basically 10 years. Like, he calls me with a question, I call him with a question, and we talk about it. And that's sort of how the podcast became a part of the world anyway. That's what we do on these episodes. It's a little more organic, which I kind of like. So anyway, I want to say thank you to you, the listener. It seems like we've got some growth in the show. Statistical downloads are going up and up. And people keep coming in and telling me how much they like it. And people I just didn't realize would even listen to it. Just kind of walking past the teaching bay. Eric, I'm enjoying the podcast. It's just fun to hear that. It's fun to hear it. And I'm glad people are getting something out of it because that's why we started this podcast. Day one,
100%.
Origin story. Isn't that right, Rob Fales?
That's right. Yeah, I had a pretty surreal moment where I pulled into Birdwood and literally the car right next to me. I had no idea who this individual was. They were playing it loud enough to where I could hear that we were playing on through his car. Had no idea who it was. But it was just like pulled into Birdwood. Hey, podcast is going on right beside me, which was kind of a cool, kind of surreal moment.
And you texted me and I was like, did you like knock on the window and say like, hey, that's me, I'm Rob? But no, and you're like, no, I didn't know. I froze.
Social anxiety got me.
But it's fun. We are having fun with it. And I was telling you a little while ago, I was in some golf forum and someone mentioned our podcast. Well, I think I might have mentioned it, but then someone chimed in and was like, hey, this is like this show, this podcast actually puts out content that helps people. It's not swing tips. It's not stuff that could help or maybe doesn't. I mean, that's not what we're about. And when we started it, we didn't probably say it directly like this, although this is what we said, was we were going to be a process-driven show. Okay, we were going to kind of encapsulate the whole process of improving at golf. And that kind of will lead us into a process question tonight that we're going to start off with. But I think we've done it pretty well. I mean, we've been pretty focused on it. And I think you could get a little bit in trouble with the content in golf when you look for a performance answer or really outcome type. Like, hey, do you want to hit it 10 yards longer? Do these 3 things. Well, maybe do those things. Or how are you interpreting what those 3 things are to you? Or are they relevant to you? Like, these are the questions we're asking. So I think what we've done a nice job of, which the feedback we're getting is, hey, I'm learning the process. I'm learning how to do things. And we're going to talk about that with the eternal golf question, which we're going to start with today.
Yes.
And I would say this is the one that people ask me casually way more than anything else. It's framed as, hey, how come I can't, why is it the longest walk from the range to the first tee? Or why can't I take it to the range? But the listener question comes from one of our Substack subscribers. His name is John Epps, and he says, why is it so hard to take the driving range to the course? I know you have said that it's because the course isn't the range, but there isn't really any difference when considering tee shots specifically. So he's talking environmentally there. Is it simply the consequences are so much more important on the course? So thank you, Mr. Epps. We appreciate the question. As always, send us questions either on our Substack or on our Instagram, and we love taking them on. We have another one we'll do tonight too, at least one more. So this is the eternal question. This is the one we all ask ourselves at some point in our lives, right? As young golfers, And I think the way that we react to this is actually really important for our growth, right? I thought about this a lot the last few days. I have a member who I teach who lives half the year in England, and he plays this really cool old golf course, and he plays in it's cultural over there to play like club matches, where you're on a men's team and you play other clubs around, and that's most of what they do. It's very social. And he said none of the courses, zero in his area, have driving ranges. Zero. He said you don't practice over there. And you think about it. Here we are in the United States, and we always say this about athletics in the United States. We over drill things. We overdo everything when it comes to that. But over there, they obviously get better at golf, right? They obviously improve, but they don't even have practice facilities. He said a couple of them have nets that you kind of swing into for a few swings. So the question begs.
I love it.
We're going to talk about this specifically from the tee shot angle, because that was the question.
Yes.
We don't want to overlap too much with what we're going to talk about next week with Dr. Pryor, because he is going to take us through all of this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be phenomenal. Yeah. So what we're going to focus on today is a little bit more hearkening back to the episode interview you did with your good friend from Game Like Training, right? This is
Ian Highfield. Yeah.
So why is it, Rob? Why is it that how I practice is different than what I'm doing on the course? We're going to generalize about amateur golfers today, so don't be offended by this. I want you to just think about it, just internalize it. And we're going to review some things we talked about before, but why can't I take what I do generally on the driving range easily to the golf course, and specifically when we talk about tee shots?
Yeah, so you've got three main ingredients, right? So the first one is going to be spacing, which is time really in between shots, but it's also physical space. Like you're literally hitting shots from a different location in space each time. And I think that part gets a little bit overlooked. That's why, if possible on the range, to switch up where you're hitting from. It's not always the most practical. And it will definitely show if you have a fixed or a growth mindset. Because if you have a fixed mindset and if your main motivation is how you look in front of others, you're not going to want to do this. But if your main objective is growth and learning, then this is something where you can do is just take one ball at a time, right? Hit your tee shot, hit your approach shot, right? If you simulate you hit the green or not, hit a pitch shot, right? And then you might even go putt. And then on your next tee shot, go somewhere different on the range, right? Don't go to the exact same spot twice in a row. So now not only are you putting more time in between drives, but you're also hitting these drives from different locations in space, right? So the spacing is going to be the first one that is usually not present when we're practicing, that is clearly evident when we go play.
Can I say something
The
real
second
quick?
one is, yes.
So growth versus fixed mindset. We did an episode a couple episodes back called The Golfer's Superpower, right? I think it was about mindset. It's called Mindset, a Golfer's Secret Superpower. And I thought it was great information, really helped me in life. And if you are listening to what Robbie's saying and you're going, I would never do that. If that's your reaction, I'm just going to tell you, you have a fixed mindset, right? If you have a growth mindset, you'll go, well, I'm going to try that. Why wouldn't I try that, right? If what I'm doing isn't working, I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. So I didn't mean to cut you off there. But I think it kind of goes back to like, here's what I am doing. I'm hitting the same club over and over again. Maybe I have a good target. Maybe I don't. There's no time in between. And I'm doing it to feel good about myself, right? It's about the dopamine release. It's about that. It's about that feeling of self-worth that I can do it. I can do it. I can do it.
Yep.
But what you're saying is that's not reality. That's not how we play.
Correct.
Okay, so you said, hit a tee shot, hit an approach shot, maybe hit a chip, hit a putt, move to a new place, and then I cut you off. So the second thing now. Second thing, Robbie.
No, that was perfect. That was awesome. So the second one is going to be variability. And so I already just touched on that to some degree when we talk about between skills. So we have two different types of variability, between skill and within skill. Between skill would be, basically as it sounds, driving, approach, short game, putting, right? And doing them generally in the order that you're going to play in, all right? So it doesn't make any sense to hit a short game shot and then go hit a drive, right? Because it's never going to happen. That's not the way we play, right? So we want to make the between skills happen in a pretty predictable order in the way that we're going to play when we go on the golf course. So between skill, but then we have within skill. And John's question is, when it comes to driving, his perception is that there is little to no within skill variability. And the problem with that is that when you go on a golf course, everything about the environment is included in the variability. You can't just parse out one piece or another. In the visual environment from tee shot to tee shot, there are no two tee shots that look the same. So there's a lot of movement information you're getting from the visual environment that's going to change how you're hitting that drive. So the within skill variability is variability within that same particular skill, right? So hitting an approach shot with the ball above your feet versus below your feet, right? That's within skill variability. On the golf course, there is within skill variability when it comes to driver because the visual environment is different. You might get a wind coming off the right, coming off the left, right? So a little bit of the kinesthetic information is different, right? So, and then you've got obviously your intention for that drive, right? There are situations where, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this because for most level 1, level 2 golfers, I want them just finding a stock drive that they can predict and doing it over and over and over and over and over again. But there are situations to where you might want to tee it up a little bit, tee it down a little bit. There is some shot variability potentially with a driver. I don't always recommend that, like I said, but there's a little bit to that as well. So the variability aspect of that, I think, is the second big ingredient. And then the third, which is what we're going to talk about at length probably next week, is the consequences, right? So are the consequences temporary, specific, and external, right, which would be a very high level of acceptance, or are they widespread, permanent, and personal, right, which would be a very low level of acceptance? And typically when we go and we practice on the range, right, we're trying to reduce those consequences. And then we're not aware of the fact that, okay, now I'm stepping on a golf course. Now I have my permanent, pervasive, personal consequences back, right? So I think the consequences piece also changes too, right? Because the worst thing that's going to happen on the range is you get to pull another golf ball and hit another one, right? Whereas on the golf course, right, you probably are coupling yourself with, I'm not saying you, the listener, but like the people who are struggling taking their range game to the course are probably coupling their self and their craft a little bit, probably too much. They're probably thinking of outcomes as a little more threatening than they really are, right? And then there are actual outcome consequences of like, okay, that's going to count on your scorecard, right? You've got to go find it wherever that golf ball finished, right, and play it from there. So that'd be an actual consequence, not a perceived. But this is actually what happens after you hit a drive that doesn't happen on the range. So those are going to be the big three. Yeah,
and so we're gonna talk a lot about this with Dr. Pryor next week. So we won't go too much more in depth. But for the listener, I think the big takeaway here is if you're practicing in a safe way to make you feel good about yourself, you're going to struggle on the course. Okay, being able to execute when you're just hitting the same shot over and over and over again with no consequence or no time. Because I think the time one is huge, in my opinion. It might be the biggest one for me. Because most of us can get in a rhythm, even if we have some swing issues, and start to time up some stuff on a range when there's no consequence, right? So if you start to create time in between and break your attention and move around and take a sip of water, go back into the shot, be able to recall the skill and hit it, that's awesome. But a lot of us can't do that, right? Or we're unwilling to try. So,
yeah, 100%.
So I think that when we get on the course and something goes wrong, then we react. And this is what we'll get into deeply next time. It's that fight or flight moment where it's like, oh, then we're like worried. What, do they think I'm a bad golfer? Am I a good golfer? Da, 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 da.
There you go.
So for me, I got to tell you,
Perceived consequences,
yeah.
right?
So I got to tell you this. I don't know if I've told this story on the pod before, but I've been really fortunate to go on some cool golf trips, right? And maybe 5 years ago, it was definitely pre-pandemic. I was invited to go 2 days to Marion and play. And this Marion is, everybody knows Marion, right? One of the hardest, I mean, I've played a lot of hard golf courses, right? Some of the hardest. Marion is so difficult, but it's so historic. It's so wonderful. And when you talk about tee shots, anybody that's played Marion will tell you there's nothing like the first tee shot at Marion. Now, granted, most of us aren't even hitting driver off that tee. Okay, it's not a long hole. Pretty straightforward. There's some deep bunkers, but there's plenty of fairway out there. But it's not that. It's the fact that the terrace where everybody eats it's huge, right?
Yeah.
So there's probably 50. I'm gonna say, I'm not exaggerating. There's probably 50 people eating on the terrace at any given time. And when you walk up to the tee and put your ball in the ground and turn to hit, the terrace is to the back of you, so you don't see any of those people. But what you do notice is, and this is what I noticed, we drove up that morning and we had lunch. And so we're sitting on the terrace eating lunch. First group comes up, everybody's talking, plates are clinking, tick, 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 you know, all this noise. And then the person turns and puts their ball on the ground and it goes silent. All 50 people stop eating, stop talking, silence.
Wow.
And then they hit. And then they talk for a couple seconds till the next person, ball goes on the ground. Everybody's silent. So there you are eating, going, okay, now I'm going to go warm up and I'm going to come back and I'm going to get that treatment, right? I would have to deal with that, right? Now, me being a golf pro, I've played state opens, and so I don't worry if people are watching me necessarily. But it's just a very unique thing because you're already so excited that you're at Marion.
So
right?
different.
This is like the iconic Ben Hogan picture. There's a great picture of Ben Hogan teeing off in the U.S. Open, let alone the shot on 18 with the 1 iron or whatever. That's really iconic. But just so excited to be there. So you come back and you hit that tee shot. So I was a little nervy. I think I missed it. Not missed it, but I didn't hit a great one. And so that night, I visualized myself hitting that tee shot over and over and over. Like I visualized again and again and again the next day. Getting up there, me hitting the 3-wood, me being nervous, like feeling the nerves and accepting it, and then just hitting it. And when I was warming up the next day, I definitely did a variability thing. I just definitely hit where I was hitting different shots, and this was at the end of my warm-up, and I was teeing, I was visualizing myself getting to that tee and hitting that shot. And when I got up and hit it, I mean, this is the best round of golf I've ever played, given the conditions and the difficulty of the golf course. And I hit it really good off that tee. But I was ready for it. And then I get invited back 5 years later, and I practiced that and visualized and trained for that moment over and over and over in the weeks leading up to that trip.
Yeah.
Because
that's awesome.
It's, for you and I going to play golf right now, we don't get nerves that often. I don't get nerves that often. I go up and hit it, I tee off, I go, right? But that was the thing I was going to be nervous about, So I trained it. And I trained it in this way, where I would hit it a couple wedge shots or something, and I'd tee it up, and I'd come back, I'd go through the whole routine. I'd visualize myself on that tee box with everybody clinking their plates behind me and then hitting the tee shot. And
totally.
I think that we just have to realize, when Ian calls it game-like training, right? These are the positions we've got to put ourselves in to perform. And by doing something like hitting 23 woods in a row off a tee to make sure I could hit it, that would have not done me any good, because when I got up there and I had one chance to do it, I'd have been nervous again, right? So pretty much after the first one, the next 2 times I was good. I really wasn't nervy on that tee shot, but I practiced it, right? I was ready for it. So I think you, the listener, what you can take away from it is you've got to make your training more like when you're in their arena, so to speak. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And just think about, and I've said this before, but processes should be pretty darn similar. Meaning when you go, and not to say you'd have to do this every time you hit a drive on the range, because I get it, but the way you pull the club out of the bag, where you put the head cover, putting your glove on, the way you're teeing your golf ball up, figuring out where on the tee box you're going to tee up from, right? Getting back behind it. Are you taking a practice swing? Are you looking up? So all the behavior stuff, and like you said, I think in the last episode, how you're walking into it. Are you taking a waggle? All of the physical behaviors, not that they would have to be exactly the same, but I think it's a good sign that they're pretty darn similar, especially with driving. I wouldn't want them to be massively, massively different when you go play relative to when you're hitting shots in training.
That's awesome. So I think that's it. I think we covered that question. Yep. So hopefully that's a good precursor to next week too, which is exciting.
Yes.
So our next question came in from, I just think from an Instagram post, somebody commented or something in, which is, when you're teaching a lesson, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit because I don't have it right in front of me. How often is it the equipment that's the issue or the main issue?
Yeah.
And I will tell you that this is one of those things that most golfers would never think that it's the first issue, unless it's a big issue and then they're aware of it. I had one of those this week, which I'll talk about a little bit. But it can be. So I think it's just part of it. It's part of the lesson experience for me, is that I'm constantly assessing anything that could be the issue, right? Quote unquote, the issue, right? When you work with TrackMan, when you work with an instructor that uses TrackMan, the metrics really help you understand what's going on every swing. And you're looking for patterns and you're seeing things that happen. Couple of ones that come to mind. Had a gentleman who comes in for a couple times a year, and he usually goes pretty well. Then he goes out and plays. He's like, it wasn't great. And he's a pretty athletic guy. And his wife sort of barged. I swear this happened. It was awesome. His wife, who's great, she kind of comes into the lesson that he's in. She says, I know he's here to get a lesson about his driver again, but it's his birthday, and I want you to fit him for a new driver. And he's not going to tell you that, so I came to tell you. And I thought that was awesome. Nice. And so she stayed to make sure that he was willing to get the driver. And I mean, it changed his driving dramatically. The issue was the shaft that he was playing and the head design that he was playing didn't work for him. It exaggerated his miss hit. When he hit it well, and this is why things would go well in the lesson, when he hit it in the center of the face and made a good swing and squared it up, everything was fine. I mean, the new driver gave him more distance for sure, but his miss, and I don't remember exactly what it was, I have to be honest. It was a little high of center on the club somewhere, high toe, high heel, whatever. And the shaft was a little weak for him. It created this big, high, spinny, cutty miss that was just basically a foul ball, right? And so when you are getting fit for equipment, you have to remember, especially drivers, and I said this on our equipment episode, you're trying to get fit for your equipment from two ends of a spectrum, okay? Especially driver. When I hit it right, it should optimize my launch conditions. It should give me everything I need to perform. Accuracy, distance, total distance, carry distance, spin rate, everything should be right there. But when I miss, and we all have our misses, even really good players, so everybody in the game has misses. Your club, and there's so many ways we can do this with club fitting. Your club should be able to minimize, as best as it can, your miss hit. And when you have issues with your clubs, it's generally because you fit for one of the other end of the spectrum and didn't take both into account. And so this gentleman needed a club that just spun it less and had more draw bias. And when he got it, it was like he didn't have to try too hard with his swing. Things just started to come together, right? So that was one that I saw recently, and I see it, daily, right? And it's really fun for me. I teach in a studio where we have, you've been in there. I should put some pictures on the Substack, but
yeah,
I could put together any club you want, right there. We can test anything you want in the moment. And so if I have a suspicion that something isn't quite right, I can just put a club together and say, hey, try this. I just want to see, I want to be able to clear my mind from what I think I'm seeing. Yeah. But if you never think, this is a growth mindset thing. If you're never open to the fact that it could be the equipment, then you could have some problems. It's not always the equipment, but it could be the equipment. And no, you shouldn't be able to just play with whatever, because that's a convention. If I'm swinging right, Eric, I should just be able to play with whatever.
Yeah.
Wrong. And the best players in the world spend the most inordinate amount of time on their equipment. You would not believe how much time they spend on their equipment, tweaking it and changing it and testing for new stuff. So the answer is often to the question, how often do I see as the equipment being the issue? The answer is often, and this is why I'm going to wrap up mine. I'm going to see if you've had some of this recently, Robbie, but I believe that you should have a coach in golf, and I believe that even if you see him once a year, or her once a year, and I believe that person should face you for your clubs. And that can't always be that way, I get it. But generally speaking, that's probably the best way to go. Just because that relationship is just a performance relationship to me. It's all part of the same deal. How about you, Robbie? You've been seeing any issues with equipment recently?
Yeah, actually. And this, I guess, goes into the bucket of just don't have too rigid of conventions around what changing club properties, quote unquote, should do to a ball flight, right? I think it's just valuable to test and see, hey, we have this expectation that doing this, all right, let's test it. Let's see what happens. I had a really, really good player come in, and he's hitting, on his Game Forge stats, he's hitting 15 greens around. It's absurd. Insane. I mean, he's hitting it so well. He's up at 8, 9 in positions, and comes in and says, hey, I'm really just struggling with my 3-wood. Like, everything else feels really good. I'm just struggling with my 3-wood. And he had some ideas around what he needed to do swing-wise to maybe try and solve it.
This is the problem.
Right? And so it's like, okay, like on the list of things that would be invasive, that would be a really, really high one on the list for something that is 1 out of 14 clubs that you're hitting 2 out of 71 shots.
Right. Well, I'm going to change
right?
my whole swing.
I'm going to change what I'm doing.
That seems,
right?
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't that he felt like he needed to change his swing, but it was definitely in the back of his head that there was maybe some things he could do to solve it with swing. Mm-hmm. And so my first instinct is, hey, we're hitting 15 greens. Let's not change a thing as far as your swing goes. Let's just see if we can solve it with equipment, right? And when I say solve, it's not really like solve forever. It's just say, hey, let's see if we can move the needle, right? And so in the moment, right, we don't have all of these different shafts. We don't have all these different heads. All we can do is basically change the hosel sleeve on his club.
And what brand was he playing?
It was a TaylorMade.
Okay, perfect.
So first thing is like, okay, he's got a 5-wood. All right, what if we took the 5-wood from a length perspective? By the way, he's hitting out the toe. Like, okay, so we can dial the 5-wood down and try and get it closer to your 3-wood loft, because he hits his 5-wood really good, like really good. It's like, okay, can we take the 5-wood and de-loft it to the point to where now it could be close enough to your 3-wood, and then maybe you can backfill with like a weaker 5-wood or something like that. Nope, can't do that. All right, so now loft is out of play. So we need something that's that like 13 and a half, 14, and we just couldn't get his 5-wood down to that loft. So, okay, so we're going to do something now to the 3-wood, right? Can we change lie angle, right? So if he's hooking it, then, on paper you would think, okay, well, if I can bias the face a bit more open, a little bit flatter setting, that should help ball flight, and definitely did not, right? But what was interesting is once we went to more upright, got the strike location away from the toe, and you would think that more upright would bias the face more closed for him, but he's a really skilled golfer. I mean, he was able to figure out really quick, and he honestly didn't hit a single hook and he hit multiple with the normal setting. I want to say like 2 or 3 hooks. As soon as we went to the more upright setting on his 3-wood, We sat there for a little bit. I mean, I want to say he hit about 23 woods and he didn't hook one, right? So I still probably not a large enough sample size to say that we definitively fixed it, but
yeah,
it's probably not a bad sign.
He was hooking it because of impact location. And that's
exactly.
the thing that gets tricky because, and I see this from time to time too. And we were sort of discussing this question. I said, my first instinct was what? I said, make it more upright, which is the opposite of what you might think, but it was an impact location issue. Club's too flat. You tend to hit it on the toe. You hit a wood on the toe as someone who draws the ball, and you're going to hook it, right? This is my miss with a wood. I know this intimately. I miss it on the toe, and it hooks. And so, and again, we don't know the right answer till we explore. We are a growth mindset. Let's check it out. Sometimes it's a shaft issue. Okay, so I had another one this week that came in, got fit. Clubs came in. I think they were ordered the wrong ones. Okay, this is my suspicion. But the shaft couldn't have been any more wrong, and it just wouldn't go in the air. Everything was a low hook, and so we again, because I'm in the bay, I could put together a different club, different shaft. Boom, he was hitting everything straight. He was a good player, so his instincts were correct. Like instincts were telling him there was something wrong about this, right?
Yeah.
But all levels of players should have some awareness. Like, hey, I feel like I'm doing the same thing, but I got this new club and I'm getting this really bad different result. And so just being aware, and again, the growth mindset comes into play because when we're in the growth mindset, we're open to question everything. Like, I could question that. It doesn't make me feel bad. I figure it out. Let's explore some options and figure it out. So whoever sent us that question was a good one because, yes, sometimes equipment, and I don't know if I've told this story, but sometimes your shoes can be the issue. I had someone who literally went from a 1 handicap to a 5 because he was playing in the wrong shoes. And he switched back. He went from flat golf shoes to running style golf shoes. Immediately started shanking it. Didn't really, connect the dots. We unwound this over the series of a lesson and figured the timeline out of when he started shanking the ball or hitting it on the heel a lot, right? A lot of heel contact, high speed player. And he's like, he found his Amazon order when he ordered these shoes. And he's like, it's when it started. It's exactly, he pulled his gin out and showed me the scores. Okay? And there was one score in there that was like a 71. And he goes, it was because I played my old shoes. He goes, I remember the day. And so he ordered a new pair of shoes, and he went from a 1 to a 5, which when a 1 goes to a 5, that feels like, I'm telling you, that feels really bad. And then he went back to the 1, almost won the member guest. That things are good.
Wow.
So
he picked it back up.
Yeah,
real
got
quick,
new shoes, and it
once
was
he
a
got the
couple
right
weeks. He
shoes.
was back to normal. So your shoes can matter, people.
Your shoes, absolutely.
We didn't get into. We wanted to ask Sasha about that because I think he would probably have some great insight. But we didn't have the time because it's just how your feet balance.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing when it comes to footwear?
To me, the heel race, and this is one thing I will tell people again: practice like you play. A lot of people come out to practice in shoes that are not like their golf shoes. Okay, so they'll come out in these, is it Hoka or whatever? They like these big sole.
Hoka's
really comfortable, I think, for walking. Or these big
so
Sketcher. Here's the story, okay? If you're wearing a running shoe or a big walking shoe like that to play golf, okay. And if you did that all the time and it worked for you, that would be one thing. But if you practice in a flat golf shoe and then you play in you play in a flat golf shoe and you practice in a big heel race, you're going to potentially be creating very, very big differences, okay? And I know this with my game. I felt it. I had some tendonitis, and they gave me these little heel pads. And anyway, I was really playing bad. And then I realized what was going on one day. This was probably 15 years ago. So, yes, if you have a heel raise shoe, it is more likely that your body, I don't want to use too technical of a term here, but it tends to get your center of pressure over your toes too much. And when you shift your weight, you have a hard time getting off the lead ball of the foot to the heel because the heel's raised. And so what I see is that that lead knee or the left knee for right-handed players stays kind of soft because it's having a hard time getting off the ball of the left foot. And then, bam, here comes the hosel because there's no space to bring it through. So not everyone experiences it, but I'm going to tell you there's more people that experience that than not and don't realize it. So point being, golf shoes are generally made pretty flat. Not all, but generally. So... And I prefer a flat shoe for my students for sure. I mean, everybody's a little different, but if that's what you play in, practice in them too.
Yeah,
get the same ones.
The ones that get me, I completely agree. By the way, on the heel toe drop, the one that gets me is when like the heel, like it's a soft heel. You know which ones I'm talking about, like where it's like there's not a firm back behind the heel. I see that create quite a bit of issues, and especially like you can start to see the shoe when it starts to. And we might have Dr. Mike K hopefully on the podcast here sometime, but he'll literally look at the shoe and you'll see when the shoe starts to what he calls like spill.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so literally the outsides of the shoe will get spilled over the base of support.
Yeah.
And so
I experienced that.
I mean, it's a big issue for green reading, especially if you're using your feet and you're using aim point to quantify slope. Please use the same shoes in practice that you're doing when you play. Don't all of a sudden start to change stuff, because that's changing your perception.
Huge.
Big time, right? So, yeah, no doubt about it.
I experienced this a little bit the other day when I played because I wore the shoes. I just haven't gotten my shoes in that I'm playing in yet this year. I ordered a new pair that haven't come in. So I wore the shoes that I teach in. I stand in all day. They're like a spikeless. They're what you're describing. And every time I tried to hit a shot with the ball above my feet slipped, and I hit it fat every time. And it's just they're spikeless and they don't have the structure in them. Mm-hmm. And so all I'm saying, and I was aware of it. I mean, it cost me 2 bogeys during the round because I just hit like these fat pull hooks, which is fine. I was really, really grateful to be playing golf that day. So I didn't bother me one bit. But I knew why it happened, but I was aware of it. Okay? So you, the listener, need to be aware of these things. That's why we created this show, to make you aware of these things. All right, Robbie. I got one more listener question that came in on my Buzzsprout. So if you look at Buzzsprout, on the podcast where we're listed on the shows, anywhere you grab it, you'll see the first line that says, "Send us a text message." And it comes through our podcast server called Buzzsprout to me. And this one I thought was really interesting, and it'll take us 10 or 15 minutes to answer this, maybe not even, but I thought it was really interesting. And I don't want to go in the weeds with this one because we could, but we'll give them the diet version of this answer. It basically said, when I'm assessing a hole for my tee shot, how do I determine what club to hit? Driver, 3-wood, iron, hybrid. What is going to be my tee shot club when I'm trying to assess? And I think this is a great question. I think it's just a great question. We haven't really talked too much about this, okay, on the show. And we're going to do a deep dive into this. We sort of started our playing lessons series a little bit the other day. This is going to be part of it.
Yes, this is part of it.
So I think this is just a phenomenal question. There's a lot of factors that come into play here, right? The very first factor is going to be the design of the hole combined with your expected dispersion pattern with your clubs, right? So you're trying to overlay those two to another. And you have some theories on this, okay? So there's some differing theories on this. And actually, I'm not 100% sure if Robbie and I have the same theory on this because I don't think we've discussed it really specifically yet. But for me, it boils down to I'm determining the places where I'm going to have either a disruptor or a penalty, if those are in play, in my dispersion pattern. And that can be things like very deep bunkers that are hard to play out of. You've got long grass situations. You got hazards for sure and out of bounds, which are the worst, right? Because they're going to be penalty shots for sure. But deep bunkers can be an issue, and we saw this at the Open Championship, where you have to try to avoid some of these because it's going to be hard to play out of them, right? So if it's a disruptor, right? I can't get to the green from there. So I'm trying to determine for me, what is my outcome? Now, Robbie showed me an app that he uses to help determine this, right? Like, this is pretty cool. So I can't remember the name of it. But so can you describe to them how you look at the satellite imagery and determine the width of the area in the landing area, and then what club to play off the tee for yourself and for your players?
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now for our YouTube. So the one Hunter Brown actually got me turned on to this one. It's called Shot Pattern. And so basically, I'm going to type in Birdwood here. What it does is it gives you a satellite image of the hole.
Cool. Check that out.
Right.
If you're on the YouTube, you can see this right now.
Yeah. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, well, what's my dispersion? And if you're in GameForge, it's a whole lot simpler than doing this, which you can go over to GameForge for. But really what you do is you figure out, okay, well, what's my carry yardage? Carry, please, with driver. And what you're trying to figure out is what is my carry. So it looks like on hole 1 at Birdwood, I typically carry driver 268, and that's pretty much, right in that fairway bunker, right? So you can see how, right, at 268 or right there, that bunker comes right into my dispersion. So the question is, I'm going to try and do this without looking, right? Is there somewhere where I can aim
there you go.
to now get the bunker out of my dispersion? Now, the problem with that target right there
it looks like you're aiming into the trees a little bit.
Is I might have tree trouble.
So if you're looking, you can see the width of that line. It's like a T, right? So you're kind of moving.
Yep.
It's moving the top line of the T.
That's the lateral
right.
dispersion.
So you're setting your lateral. What do you set your lateral dispersion at? Or does it?
I set it at 65 yards.
So think about this, people. This is Rob Fales, good golfer, scratch golfer, pro golfer. He sets his lateral dispersion at 268 carry at 65 yards to avoid disruptors and penalties, correct? Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And depending on conditions, right, I'm going to want to look at, somewhere around the 280-ish, 290 total to see if it's going to run into anything for sure. But what you can see here is depending on these trees, right, so literally how high the trees are, like, do I expect that I'm going to be able to carry those trees? And if not, then it's a question of, okay, how bad is that fairway bunker? Like, what's my ability to actually play it out of there and get it onto the green? I know that particular bunker, I always hit driver here because there's basically no lip. Like, it's not really a penalty if you hit in that bunker, so I go ahead and send it. But if, let's say, it were bad, then I would have to say, okay, well, does laying back actually take it out of play, right? And so if you look, as I pull this thing back, if I hit it 235 off the tee, 236, that gives me 131 in, right? And so I can probably get a little more of my dispersion in the fairway if I do that.
Can you show that on the camera? Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Yep. So if I hit it 240, I can, or not past 240, I can still have 127 in.
It's a little short club. You're still hitting wedge in. Yeah.
So that's not a bad option, right? So because the bunker is not really a penalty, I still send it because I would much rather have the proximity to green for my second shot. But if that bunker were a problem, then that's probably what I would do. Because there's really not room, right? I'm going to have tree trouble or bunker in my dispersion, whereas if I lay back, now I can safely get my entire dispersion in the fairway or in the rough. And I still only have 132, and so I've got a pitching wedge in, so it's fine.
So a couple things I tell people, because that's from a level 3 golfer, right, describing. You'll hear some notions that hitting it in the rough doesn't matter. I don't believe hitting in the rough does not matter for all levels of golfer. I think there's a lot of golfers that hitting in the rough can be a problem, right? Depending on how the rough is, right? So you're kind of assessing the conditions of the day. So some of us just don't have the speed to hit it very far if the ball gets in the rough, right? It just is what it is.
Yeah.
And so hitting it into the fairway is important. Hitting it further into the fairway is important as well, though, right? Because we still want to have shorter shots in. So essentially, to me, we're trying to get as far down there as we reasonably can, while avoiding basically penalty areas, right? Like in the or losing a ball, right? Because I could lose a ball.
Correct.
I mean, there's some courses that are sort of carved out of the woods where they have some width, but at the end of the width is a lost ball. Like it's it's rocks and it's ferns and you're in the forest, right? So you just can't find your ball.
Do you want to hear a cool stat from GameForge? Fairway versus rough dispersion. So if you look at the approach shot from the fairway, what that dispersion looks like, and then you look at from the rough, approach shot from the rough, what that dispersion looks like. The dispersion gain from fairway to rough would be the equivalent of, if you stayed in the fairway, you go back 80 yards.
Whoa. So
80 yards, and then that dispersion would then start to look the same, right? So fairway, in terms of dispersion size, costs you about 80 yards.
Yeah,
that's significant, right? But then the question is like, all right, if you base your strategy upon that, it doesn't mean you can just, like, if you lay back, you can just drop the ball in the fairway.
Correct.
Right?
You can't assume you're going to hit it in the fairway.
You can't assume you're going to hit it in the fairway. So it's like, okay,
yeah,
right. So it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean, hey, I need to sell out on hitting every single fairway, because A, you can't just drop it in the fairway anyway, and B, they equal out at 80 yards. So again, if you can hit it 80 yards down there in the rough, right, 80 yards further in the rough is going to be the same as laying back, right? So you might as well hit it 80 yards down there and have the chance of hitting it in the fairway, right? So there's two sides to that coin, but a pretty interesting stat, and I think it actually plays pretty heavily on par 5 decisions. Yeah. Like if you're going to go for the green in 2, which we can get into. Maybe on a different episode, but because they're kind of the same. Like go for greens and drives are really, really, really darn similar in terms of the decision tree. Yeah.
The thing I was going to say is, I'm old enough to have played golf with wooden drivers. Okay, so that's when I started playing, and it was just sort of like the intro to a steel-headed driver, and then obviously the titanium. Not too long after that, but a lot of people would hit 3-woods off of tees because drivers were just really hard. I mean, it was really hard to hit a driver. And a 3-wood, it became something reasonable to hit off a tee, or a 2-iron. And I think what plays out with modern equipment is the drivers have become easier to hit. They have, right? They become so forgiving. If you get fit well, like we just described in the last question, it should minimize your big miss. It should, accentuate your good hit and minimize your bad one, and it becomes a good weapon for you. And so the point you made about saying, if I lay back, I can't assume I'm going to hit the fairway is true. A, you're probably hitting a club that's a little less easy to hit now. Whereas back in the day, and I think this is a little left over from when 3-woods were easier to hit than drivers. Mm-hmm. They're not anymore, okay? No. They're not anymore.
Dispersion's not hardly any
I almost
different.
Never hit 3-wood off a tee for this reason. If it's going to be too narrow, then I'm going to hit an iron off the tee, right? Correct. When I hit 3-wood off the tee, it's because I'm laying up in front of something, like a dog. Mostly it's a dog leg, angle.
Yeah, or a creek.
Correct, or a bunker that's really hard to play out of, right? Yeah. So I'm going to say, I don't want to hit in that bunker. Even 10% of the time, I don't want to hit in that bunker. So I'm going to hit 3-wood to keep it short.
Not willing to accept that penalty.
Yeah, and so then I'm hitting 3-wood. But if I'm not hitting 3-wood, it's an iron. It's my 4-iron. Boom, 4-iron off the tee.
Yeah.
So because I do feel like I can disperse that more narrow, there is a good chance of that for me off the tee. So it's just not going to fly in the air long enough to be too crooked, essentially. So 3-woods are not automatically more accurate than drivers. So don't assume that.
No.
And, even a long iron isn't necessarily too.
Yeah, and like for a lot of these older style golf courses, if you look at the fairway width is going to be 30-ish yards, 30, 40 yards, and then you're going to get 10 yards of rough maybe on either side, right? So then you're right there. That takes you to 50. And then trees, right? So then there's nothing you can do to really fit your entire dispersion out of tree trouble. So if laying back doesn't give you anything wider, then just send driver.
And the benefit of hitting a shorter club is massive, which we've gone through in our episodes early on. So I think that kind of covers that question. I thought that was pretty good. So it's essentially, if you can hit driver, send it. Use the, what's it called? What's the shot pattern? It's cool. I do have it. I haven't, because I don't play a lot, I haven't used it yet. Shot pattern. Yeah. Understand your dispersion, or kind of make a guess, right? Like a lot of people, we could probably give them some guidelines on that, depending on how far you hit it. I think if you're a long hitter like Robbie, it's 60 yards for me. I plan more like 50. I don't hit it quite as far as he does, 50 or 60. If you hit it 200 off the tee and pretty solidly, you could probably do it a little narrower, right? Because geometry is coming into play here. So
we're gonna make it a lot easier for your members on Sunday.
Make it a lot easier. So that was fun. Listener question episode.
Yeah, that was
in the
fun.
Books. We appreciate the support of the show. It's been really, really cool. If you have a moment, please subscribe to whatever podcasting app that you like. Subscribe to it on there. And if you want to rate it and review it on Apple Podcasts, it'd be pretty awesome as well. We would really appreciate that. And we do have a Substack for our bonus exclusive content. And if you want to sign up for the free content there as well, we're gonna make sure we put out a notice every time that we post a new episode, so you get the notification. We'll put some other fun stuff on there. A lot of our bonus episodes are behind the paywall there. So if you want to support the show and get a bonus episode once a month, we're going to do that, and some other stuff on there, which is really fun. So that is thegolfintervention.substack.com. And we do have a YouTube channel, not getting a lot of hits right now, which is fine. We haven't really done anything with it. We sort of just upload stuff on there. Robbie's mom's been working on some cool videos for that, so we'll be posting more and more of that. And other than that, I just want to say thank you for indulging us in our effort to put some good information out into the world.
Yep.
We've had a fun time doing it, and we're glad you tune in each week. Rob, you have any words of wisdom for the listener as we wrap up tonight?
We'll see you next week. It's going to be a really, really fun one.
Raymond Pryor, Golf Beneath the Surface is the book. Get the audio book, or get it on the Kindle. I've actually got it right here. I'll show the listener. There it is. Golf Beneath. It's going to be back. Oh, we both have it. Golf Beneath the Surface. We're just really fortunate that he's come. We were so fortunate that Sasha came on and Mark Sweeney. It's a little bit of a pinch me moment, some of this stuff. I got to be honest. And we're having some fun with it. Thank you to the listener. Get the book. Read it just like you would at college. Read it before the exam. And we're just glad you're on the journey with us. That's all I got to say.
Yep. Grateful.
Growth mindset. Here we go.
That's right.
Have a great night, everybody.